Um, Hello to the humble denizens of the earth. This is my rant on the Maduro raid because I, for the love of Christ, don't understand what's happening. Sorry. So, basically, the biggest question that I have been asking, that everyone has been asking, is that, like, is this allowed? And the obvious, very much justified answer is that no, it is not allowed. A dude from one country cannot go into another country and just take someone, no matter who they are, in this case, the president of that country, and just like take him in. Like, not only because they should not have that power, uh, unless under very specific circumstances that are usually achieved when countries are already at war, kind of, where the idea, like, for example, in World War II, they were actively trying to infiltrate Germany and get Hitler. Obviously, that's very different, He was still in a very high position of power, didn't quite have presidents at the time, he was in a almost like a president at that point in time. He had quite a lot of power, and if someone managed to conduct a raid like this one at that time, it would have been fine because it was like an act of warfare, basically. And war, however terrible it is, does excuse a lot of actions from many, many sides. And obviously, the reason why it's not allowed in terms of prospect of power is like Trump here is acting kind of like a judge, jury, executioner, because in which, like, he should not have that power. As a matter of fact, no one should have that power. Right now, he judged Maduro to be guilty. He then decided to take him into court and is now trying him. And then I don't know what the outcome of this is gonna be, because can he just put him in jail? And the answer should also be no. Now, I'm not trying to defend Maduro here necessarily. Like, the man is terrible. He's very much guilty ever since, all of this started, and I've been hearing about him, and I'm like, okay, this is not a good man. He should, like, not be in charge. But what Trump probably believes he's doing is that he's doing a favor to the Venezuelan people. And he is not. He's not doing them a favor at all, because, well, their country is basically getting colonized by Americans at this point, except for the fact that it's already populated and already has its own government, however, flawed it may be, much like however flawed, like, the US's government can be. No one can just swoop in and take the president and take him away. That would cause mass national outrage. So why are we looking at this Venezuelan raid as anything different? Because, if once again, if let's say, like, China, something that has had very interesting relations with the Trump administration so far, just decided that they were gonna take Donald J. Trump and just kind of kidnap him. Suppose everything goes successfully, just as it did here. These officials would be outraged, and I do not see why the same exact form of respect can be offered to the Venezuelan people, which are no different in Americans, because they have their government and they have themselves, they have their autonomy. They do not need the United States to act as some knight in with, like, a knight with white oh my god, a knight in shining armor, and, like, save them. Not only to say that this is almost completely ineffective, and probably the biggest example that I can draw, like, biggest hypothetical I guess I can draw on this being Russian, is what would happen if this would be the exact same situation, basically, but it's Putin who got taken away. And my honest take to you would be is that I would be happy that he would be taken away, because he was just a terrible man and I want him gone. But what, many Venezuelans are outraged right now is not the taking away the man itself, it's largely what's happening afterward, where the president of the United States, Howard, is saying, hey, I'm gonna run your country, and he's not even giving you a specific time. In fact, he's saying it's gonna happen for a while. Now, what is the while? Centuries? Like, months? It could be anything at this point. And that's beside the point, that they don't need to be run by you. You have no authority in Venezuela. Why are you running their country? Why do you think you have the authority to take this man in the first place? Like, yes, he's a bad man. And yes, he's fucking guilty, but who are you to do this? And it just kind of makes me outraged, because that just causes a whole plethora of problem. And then obviously, if the UN doesn't react to this appropriately, then kind of the mentality that may or may not happen is like, well, if he can, why can't I? Which is gonna, like, in any other tense relations, if people start doing something akin to this, like chaos, war, global war, like anything at this point. I mean, this is basically an act of warfare, but they're not in war. Like, I don't think he even realizes this this seriousness of his action. He kidnapped a president, and he's just like, it's fine. I don't, I don't understand, which is really my question here. To point out, this is no selfless act. It's in fact the opposite. It's very selfish. There's a reason why, like, the Venezuelan people aren't getting say in this, even though they should be the only people saying things. They should be completely in charge of this situation unless they outright say, you be in charge of this situation. Which they have not said. In fact, they're saying the opposite. They're saying, stop what you're doing. This is our country, and they have a right to say that because they're completely correct. They, like, obviously the vice president, the woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize, which I also question because she's no better woman either. She's very interesting, but then again, Trump was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, so I don't know what's happening in the world anymore. But she's still the vice president. In fact, according to the rigged election that happened in Venezuela, she should have been the president. So at this point, not only is Trump kidnapping a president, he's undermining the authority of the Venezuelan government right now as well. This isn't a one-time situation. He just completely does not care about the legitimacy of his country's status. And if he doesn't, that's how you go into war. That's what happens when you undermine a country's status, and they're like, well, if we're threatened, we're gonna defend ourselves. And they're going to, and at this point they have a right to, because I don't think the Venezuelans want to defend Maduro. They want to defend their own security, which apparently they're not allowed to have anymore. Like, I don't understand what the logic is here. And even if this person, Maduro, managed to, is like, oh my god, ruled guilty in a court, does he assume that he has the power to enact the punishment? Because I don't understand. Like, there isn't the UN has not called for an arrest of this man. If they were, it shouldn't up to be a single government to complete that arrest. It's going to be responsibility of the United Nations. And once again, the only people acting in this is the United States, who have effectively deemed themselves and are acting as if they're the judge, jury, and executioner. And that's just what's happening. When you look at the responses of the UN, they haven't been really outright, like, as much as, you would want them to be saying, this is bad, we need to, like, basically punish Trump. Like, that's kind of what I would like to happen. Is, like, obviously statements like dangerous precedent, which of course, once again, as we talked about this, one of the examples brought up that I've been hearing for the past couple days actually is like China and Taiwan. Like, okay, what would, like, stop China from doing something similar to Taiwan, completely undermining authority, not to mention that China's kind of been doing that already because of just such heated relations between those two countries. And, like, this is all just completely crazy. And that's kind of what I want to stress. Because I don't understand. This man didn't even report it to the officials on Congress that he needed to report it to. And going back to that idea of selfishness, not only did he keep it private, there's this very clearly, this entire operation is not some liberation of the Venezuelans. It's clearly just for the single purpose of America, to this idea of like imperialism and, growing more stronger and powerful, to also just saying that they now have ownership of their oils. Like, Venezuela, in terms of resources, is very prosperous. I believe they have a lot of natural resources, stuff like iron. I think they're very prosperous in that, uh, forests, wood, stuff like that as well. And obviously, the oil, a lot of oil in that country. And they're just like, so far the response has been, yeah, that's our oil. So the purpose behind this operation becomes very clear very quickly, that you just need to remove the theoretically most powerful threat here in this country, which they have deemed to be Maduro. We need to give some plausible reason for taking him, so we're just going to say, oh, okay, he's a criminal, so we're going to judge him, and we're just going to count that as a plausible reason. And then we're going to basically take this country's resources as its presumed leaders now, because, if we take the president, that means we have to run it. Never mind that this government has already been functioning by itself for many, many years as a government that is very much self-sufficient to run itself. Now, obviously, the Venezuelan government is very corrupt. Like, I think that's pretty common knowledge at this point, now that I've been hearing about Venezuela and the situation going on there for the past half a year or so. Like, this goes back all the way to when the Venezuelan election was happening, and we were hearing, like, how it was rigged and stuff, like, how Maduro won when he lost. And, that was very clear that he was lost. And it's just, like, I'm not saying that perhaps morally, to a certain extent, this isn't necessarily terrible, because you're trying to, judge a man who is very much corrupt. But this is obviously was not done for the sake of Venezuelans. This was done for the sake of an American, one specific American in power. I think you know who I'm talking about. And this was done also horribly. Like, the military part of the plan is successful. Obviously, Maduro was retrieved, and that was the entire point of the operation. That's beside the point that the casualty count hasn't been released yet. But, I'm sure it's something really tragic, and I hope I'm wrong. But everything after that has been horrible. What the president's saying is absolutely stupid, and clearly other members of Congress are trying to clean up his mess for him, but at the same time they're not really disagreeing with him entirely. So, is the thing that Trump's saying, like, stupid? Is it wrong? Or is it wrong in a different type of way? Morally wrong. That's what I'm saying. I think this entire situation is morally wrong. I hope that the UN takes a really, really strong stand on this and makes it clear to the entirety of the American Congress that they cannot do this. That they cannot do this. Obviously, there have been similar situations beforehand with, the Americans and really other countries, obviously, seizing certain political leaders in somewhat or like completely secret classified operations. But the pattern is that a lot of those had some sort of justification in the terms that that person was an actual threat to that country, Americans, for example, in this case. So that can be viewed as an action of defense. This here was an action of offense from the United States, one that was just really not precedented in, a very interesting way. Like, Venezuela has not made very, like, major direct threats to United States as far, and I'm willing to make the statement that it wasn't going to. I don't think that Venezuela wanted to directly harm the United States. And, this is an offensive action. As I said before, this is basically an act of war, but we're not in war. So, how is he getting away with this? Obviously, if we were in war, however terrible that was in Venezuela, if there was a war currently, Venezuela, as much as no one would want that, this would perhaps be an excusable action because it is an act of warfare and you're in war. This is how you win wars. But this, for the love of Christ, isn't a war. It's just attack. An attack that was in no way unprecedented. There's no declaration of war. There wasn't even a warning to Congress within the United States. No one knew this was going to happen. Practically no one, if you speak on a large scale. So, like, who has the power here? Because it shouldn't be the people who are claiming the power now. Because the precedent this is only saying is that, like, not only does everyone have the power, right now it's saying, well, we got this power and we can just take it. And so far they haven't been wrong, and it is disgusting. I don't think Trump realizes that there should be consequences of their actions, and I really hate to say it, but I think he's right with how everything's going, and once again, I'm going to say this another time, I really hope that the UN takes a proper stand on this, a really harsh, a very clear stand, because it is just, it's disgusting. And that's really, like, I mean, that's kind of the gist of my thoughts.